there's a certain aspect of the American public, the American population, that just doesn't trust this garbage anymore, right? Because it's reaching a point now where you'd have to say that the regime change propaganda is really no longer even convincing anymore, right? In the past, I was in high school when the Iraq War was a thing, when it first started. I mean, it's still a thing, but when launching the Iraq War was a thing. And I remember people really believed that we had to bring freedom to Iraq. People really believed this. This was a real talking point back in, I think it was March of 2003 when the war was launched. People genuinely believed that we were trying to bring, freedom and justice to Iraq, and also that they were somehow responsible for 9/11 and all this other crap. A lot of people don't seem to be buying this nonsense about regime change and socialism and the Sebastian Gorka. The socialists are trying to take away your hamburgers and pickup trucks. People don't seem to be buying this anymore, and that's a good thing. But what's interesting is that they're still trying to do it. And not only are they still trying to do it, they're still using the same old nonsense. This idea, this liberal idea, we have to move into this country and establish democracy and freedom and a constitution, and we're going to somehow turn Venezuela into a first world nation, a European-style nation or something to that effect. This idea is losing validity every single day. It's interesting to see the same plays get run over and over and over again. Somehow, the United States was only sending humanitarian aid into Venezuela. In fact, the media was demonizing Maduro. They were demonizing Maduro, and they were saying Maduro is evil because his people are starving, and and he's not letting the United States funded humanitarian aid with the most condescending air quotes possible. He's not letting the humanitarian aid into his country, and as such, he's a really, really bad guy. Now, humanitarian aid is code word for machine guns. It's code word for materials required to destabilize a nation. And the people delivering said humanitarian aid are oftentimes in the CIA or any other, governmental agency that is that is looking to change the course of the history of a nation for the Anglo-American Zionist Empire. And I think in this particular case, there is no doubting this is true, because there are these very interesting photos popping up of Venezuelan freedom fighters. What do we see? Venezuelan army in La Carlota. We see a Venezuelan gentleman in a gas mask holding an M4 Colt made in the USA. Is there really any doubt? Is there really any doubt as to where Juan Guaido's freedom fighters got their weapons from? Could this be what was in the crates that were labeled humanitarian aid that were designated for delivery into Venezuela, I wonder? I'll tell you, I think that this was the case. In fact, the American public, more or less, voted for Donald Trump for two reasons. One was immigration, and the second was foreign interventionism that didn't benefit them. And I think this is pretty obvious here, right? I think this is pretty obvious. The foreign interventionism is not benefiting us, and that's what people aren't voting for. But when the establishment senses that they are in trouble, when the establishment senses that the more democracy, more liberalism, 2003 era nonsense isn't working, and it hasn't worked, by the way, with Syria. Remember, Obama tried this with the whole Assad is gassing his own people, and then Trump tried it twice with Assad is gassing his own people. It didn't work. And so what did they do? Did they come up with a new excuse? Did they think of a new reason to invade Venezuela? It is a resounding no. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look. What has the United States government cooked up as another retarded, full-on retarded reason to invade Venezuela. Russia could install nuclear missiles in Venezuela, U.S. Republican claims, after Secretary of State admits America will take military action in the country if necessary. So you see, when you go with the Bush era, we got to spread more liberalism and more democracy and more constitution to the third world type stuff, and it doesn't work. You got to go back in time even further to the Cuban Missile Crisis, because of course nothing will resonate with the American people more than a crisis that existed in 1962 before John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Nothing. Obviously, this 57-year-old narrative holds more water than ever. Republican Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart claimed the Russians could install nuclear missiles in Venezuela. This is so insane. This is so insane. Russia could secretly install nuclear missiles in Venezuela if the Maduro regime is allowed to continue, a U.S. Republican congressman claimed, hours after the country nearly descended into civil war. Mario Diaz-Balart made the claims after Venezuela's U.S.-backed opposition leader, Juan Guaido, called for his rival president, Nicolas Maduro, to be expelled for office. With the term rival president, is that, Venezuela was expelled from the international banking system, I think. I know Iran has been. So is it more socialism that's destroying Venezuela? Or is it the fact that, I don't know, they can't do business with anybody not named, I don't know, Russia or maybe China? They've got very few political allies. When you're expelled from the banking system, it's a big problem. Big problem. That even the most brilliant philosopher is essentially writing an autobiography. All of us see the world through a lens that we've inherited from our parents and from our ancestors, and through a lens that has been created by our experiences. There is no such thing, my friends, as unbiased journalism. I will not weep for the plight of the journalist. Every journalist, almost every, there are some out there that strive for the ideological purity, the abstraction of the person who's just dedicated to the truth or something to that effect. But almost every journalist has their biases, and they're looking to prove them right. So I'm not going to sit here and act like something terrible happening to a journalist is some great affront against humanity that I should be offended by. Okay? A tweet accompanying the clip claimed he was shot by one of the Venezuelan National Guard in Caracas today. You gotta love how they frame this. It's like, if a regime is being attacked, the regime is going to defend itself. This is not a moral judgment. Power will seek to defend itself. It will seek to consolidate itself. And that's exactly what Maduro was trying to do here. Yeah, there was this whole big deal, about the Russians putting nukes in Cuba, but we had nukes in Turkey pointed directly at the Russians, now didn't we? And what a lot of people don't want to talk about is that the Cuban Missile Crisis, JFK only was able to get the Russians to remove their nukes from Cuba because he removed the nukes that were in the closest proximity to the Soviet Union. So it was really essentially a tit-for-tat deal. But the Russians are largely surrounded by enemy forces. If you were to take a look at the amount of U.S. military bases surrounding Russia and the amount of Russian military bases surrounding the U.S., there's going to be a bit of a difference. The Russians don't want to be bullied, so what do? They negotiate a deal with someone who has a ton of natural resources. I mean, there's, rare earth minerals in Venezuela and oil. And of course the U.S., through its policy of embargoing people, has set Venezuela up for doing business with Russia, because guess what? Russia has also been sanctioned like crazy, right? It's almost the way that the United States and the British forced the Japanese into an alliance with the Germans and the Italians before World War II by violating various treaties that they had with the Japanese leading up to the Second World War. Who else are the Venezuelans going to do business with aside from the Russians when the West has largely blacklisted them. I don't think anything that the United States does at this point helps white America. And I resent these wars, not because I am always anti-war, but because white men will fight and die in a war in Venezuela to protect the interest of a country and an empire that is inherently anti-white. I mean, there's no reason to support military action by the United States if you're a white man. Because what do you get out of it? You go, you fight, you die, and then what? You're just shot out of the ass end of this war. If you get shot, you're going to get no medical treatment by the VA. You're going to get nothing. You get nothing. Very few Americans are falling for this anymore. Very few. And that's a good thing, by the way. That's a good thing, because it's the same excuses over and over again. Like I said, it's either more democracy, more liberalism, more capitalism, the socialists are trying to take away your hamburgers, or some shit like that, or it's the Russians. The Russians have nukes. They are installing the nukes, and as such, we must take them out. If you're going to lie to me, at least be creative. Wait till they say that Maduro is gassing his people and taking babies out of incubators. Exactly. And this is the same. I mean, how many times have you heard that stupid clip of that, actress that was in front of Congress talking about Saddam Hussein? And they took the babies. And they took him out of the incubator. This is garbage.